Artisan Conversation, True Lies and Alibis. Wyndham City and Wyndham Art Gallery acknowledges the peoples of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham Art Gallery stands and on which this podcast was recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Welcome to Go Deeper, Wyndham Art Gallery's podcast channel, part of our Go Deeper program that provides an in-depth look at each of our exhibitions. Today you are listening to an abridged recording of the True Lies and Alibis Artisan Conversation. This was an artist talk between curator Dr. Megan Evans and exhibiting artist Julie Gough on July 6, 2020 at Wyndham Art Gallery. Trawula Way artist Julie Gough has exhibited widely across Australia and internationally. For True Lies and Alibis, she presents a multi-layered installation focusing on Tasmanian Aboriginal children taken by colonists in the early 1800s, including her ancestor, Dalrymple Briggs. Gough's installation explores the experience of her ancestor and other Aboriginal contemporaries as awareness emerges nationally that history has more than one side, that assumed truths are due for reevaluation. This exhibition discloses historic crimes that continue to resonate for First Peoples. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy learning more about this exhibition and that you'll tune in for future Artisan Conversation recordings and other Go Deeper programming events.
Welcome everyone, and thanks Julie for being here online to discuss your powerful exhibition, True Lies and Alibis. Firstly, I acknowledge that I'm meeting with you today by Zoom from Wadawurrung country, and I pay my respects to the elders of this nation, past, present and future, and it's particularly important in the context of this exhibition to acknowledge that their sovereignty was never ceded. So thanks for being with me today. So let's get into talking about this extraordinary exhibition. And it has to be said that I'm very disappointed that people can't immerse themselves in the work in person. But thanks to our virtual gallery, they can do the next best thing. And the beauty of that is that we can share this amazing show beyond the borders of Wyndham and Victoria and even Australia.
Well, thanks, Megan. Yeah, I'm speaking from Muwinina country. So that's the region around Hobart, which is Nibbaluna, one of the names for this area. And Muwinina are no longer with us. And so my people are Trawula Way from the northeast of Tasmania, Lutruwita. So most of our people are from the northeast originally and look after, responsible for all of Lutruwita.
So much of your work is based on research, and I imagine a lot of that information has been there anecdotally, but it's also been stuff that has been unearthed more and more from archives. How much of your time do you spend researching your work compared to making it, or do they intertwine? Do they work together?
Yeah, good question. I'm thinking that research is just the same as breathing and eating and just walking. It's constant. It's just input and sometimes following more particularly a lead or a thought, but other times it's just, it's inputting without knowing it. So that's just life is research. And art making feels more like I have a destination in mind and the artwork will be there with me when I land somewhere. Those journeys, specific journeys are more like the art making that are parts of these different journeys that start to interconnect more and more, which is great.
Like an unfolding of the artwork and the research, which I can see in your work, that research isn't research in a traditional Western European sense at all. It's like you say, it's part of the journey of being an artist and being a person even.
It's much more a creative research process where I trust things will unfold as they're meant to. And I listen because, if something isn't happening, it's for a reason, or why is that happening? Why? Everything has a kind of why, but also let it be. And most of the time it's just letting things come in random conversations can lead to quite amazing eventual artworks or outcomes.
I was following you, I think on Facebook at the time, where you were talking about the experience of stalking the coloniser. When you're travelling around the country and finding the sites of colonial homesteads.
Yeah.
A bit about that experience and how that turned into the Slingshots in the work Stolen in the exhibition.
Yeah, it comes and goes, that feeling of stalking the colonists. It's a kind of holding them to account, because many of them refuse to do so, to kind of admit like where and how they are who they are now, like how they came to be where they are with what they have, which is as a direct result, those that arrived particularly here, Lutruwita, Tasmania, before 1831. So the land grants, there were, I think, I think it was like 3,200 before 1831 were distributed grants to those incoming colonists. The averages were between 20 and 2,000 acres. You know, it's really a struggle when you're removed from your country that is also your family. And this means that we're now starting this year a very intense 10 years we have to kind of suffer through. They're about to go into a whole spate of bicentennial celebrations, which is how colonists here are explaining their longevity here as a celebration. And those that are most kind of loudest in celebrating are those that have managed to stay on those original land grants. But it's also, in a way, an opportunity to actually present what they were part of. And if you dig kind of deep enough in the records, you can find enough detail, even in their absences, for what these early colonists undertook to make sure the lands were free of our people. So you want to make sure that in their amplification of their celebration, that there's our voice explaining what that correlates with is our loss. I suppose at the moment I'm focusing on those families that came in that decade, so a bit more prepared rather than just the immensity of Vandemonian colonisation. There's just to be not on the back foot when we start getting these events that also some Aboriginal people are being invited to provide welcomes to country at, which I find also very confusing and worrying, particularly if it's not clear what those families partook in.
What is the impact on you personally in joining the dots? Because that's what I see a lot happen in your work. You join the dots between what happened to your ancestors at the beginning of colonisation in Tasmania and what happens now. Some people call that intergenerational trauma, the sort of impact, the ongoing impact that people are dealing with on a daily basis, and the fact that, people don't have a lot of property. They don't have, people are often at the bottom end of the socioeconomic scale. So what's been that impact on you personally?
Yeah, to be clear about, as best as we can, what occurred here and how to share it beyond ourselves. So that's where I'm thinking art has been a useful tool for me to try and clarify, firstly, for me and my family, how we are, who we are, but also then, wait a minute, this is much bigger than just ours and our extended family. It's all our Aboriginal families here. And then by extension, it seems to get broader and broader to be international, First Peoples situation, dispossession from each other and from our lands. I think the more different ways that people can approach and learn and share, the more we can, sort of deconstruct and reconstruct ourselves according to like what we feel is true.
How was the work Missing or Dead received in Queen's Domain during Dark Mofo?
That was interesting in that I was presented the possibility and opportunity to install the work in the forest next to Hobart, which is the Queen's Domain where Government House is. In every way, a very symbolic and actually important forest. It overlooks Hobart. There just seems to be relationships there that the forest is really kind of alive to that possibility of installation in the forest. So it seemed like a good forest to present the work. The forest is mainly wattle and she oak and not very large trees. So it kind of fitted the idea of these children. So the work was 185 posters, spread them in a particular way that you could navigate the whole lot as a forest loop. The forest became, for me, not just the right place, but the opportunity for more than, I think it was some huge number, maybe even 10,000 people saw it. There was a memorial artwork, worked well in the daytime, but at night I think I feel concerned I kind of sacrificed the children to people that, weren't there just for that purpose. So perhaps I would install the work again outdoors, where I think it's at its strongest, because it's kind of where the children are even now. Like, they're lost in Tasmania, most of them. A great deal of them are still missing. And even those that died are basically out there somewhere still. So the forest felt correct. The festival didn't feel like the best way for people to work or encounter the children. So I got very mixed feelings, and but I retrieved them at the end, and now they're installed indoors, and that's another opportunity to see how they work in a different configuration, as we are so often questioned by non-Aboriginal historians about what is our history, and our truths are not those that the Western Academy often wishes to believe or quote. In this instance, it is actually the information that survives about those children from the Western record, because pretty much otherwise many of them just do not exist otherwise at this point, beyond the feeling that we have that there are so many children missing. There's a kind of indisputable truth for Western academics, which partly doesn't sit well with me either, but I decided to go with that to show the immensity of the loss of our children, that I could create 1,000 posters, and may well do so, to show those that we don't have names for, that still were taken and killed during that first, particularly 50 years post-British invasion. Basically, it does implicate the colonists around the children, and it does, I think, register as, massacre of families. And the word massacre is very contentious, but it's murder. Massacre seems to be going along the lines of a term that supposedly means 5 or more deliberate deaths, according to what's happening with research and so massacre maps online, etc. at the moment. But the children are they're clues beyond their own lives for what was happening to our people.
I found it very emotional, even when the package arrived and it came to my house, because the gallery was closed, and I opened the package, and this stack of posters, like this high. And when I opened it, I actually burst into tears. It was like very moving, because it was like you really got the weight of it. And I think that's the power of your work, is that you give people an emotional, people get an emotional experience from your work, which I think is extremely powerful. But one of the things that occurred to me was I've been trying to learn some of the names, and I know Nika in her catalogue essay mentioned say their names, the idea of being able to say the names of these people. And so many of them have unfortunately been reduced to the cliches of European names that they've been given. But the thing that I really loved was trying to get my mouth around some of those really beautiful long Aboriginal names. And that made me sad as well, that those names are recorded for so few.
Yeah, I think the children there's a few that were taken that somehow their original name and the name the colonists gave them survives between different records. So one girl was taken called Tubalongata, and she and her brother his name I only know as Alexander, and she was then called Margaret after that, Tubalongata. And I've been twice in the last 2 weeks to the East Coast here to understand where they were taken from, because there's another record of them being stolen from. Basically, their family was where the family was staying on the East Coast near Swansea here their home was raided where they were staying. It's usually called by the colonists camp, as though, this sort of people that are not significantly, this idea of a camp, their camp was raided rather than their home. And the children were taken, the adults are all killed, and this is because there's no numbers. I don't know that will even make the massacre map. That's the way that people are presenting massacres, I think, needs more expansion upon anything such as a child being taken, being registered on such maps to indicate the violence and the unknown number. The numbers can turn into, wind shuttle type debates. And but then she became stubborn and obstinate. And according to a letter from the family, Temple Pearson and his wife took her in. This language took her in as though she's a puppy, and they decide they want to discard her. And she's sent to Flinders Island. So on Flinders Island, she's isolated because she's amongst her own people that she never has really known since she was 3 years old, and now she's a middle teenager. So this is heartbreaking that she then asks, apparently, to be put in a position as a servant back on mainland Tasmania. And after a year back on Tasmania itself, she then gets sent back to Flinders Island again and dies. And according to Robinson, the missionary's own son, the soldiers did it. So she's killed. To me, it's a memorial, and it can be mobile. And I think that is a new way of looking at how we can memorialise, because we carry what we learn within us and we become mobile memorials anyway. But such as this work on paper, I think the stalking of the colonial properties, that the work stolen, those works for years I've been filming and stopping at the Colonial Gate, continue to do so. Even recently was filming at a gate, and in the north, on the Midlands Highway in the north, was a gate. The name is Native Point, after an Aboriginal quarry. So, it's as in stones. And that's the first time I'd filmed that gate. It's a difficult spot to stop, and I kept thinking, oh, well, I'll stop there. And then I did. And then the owner pulled up, like at that, when I've got the tripod out, and the wife of the owner was adamant that I wasn't allowed to photograph from the other side of the highway, a gate that shows no property or person, just a gate, and the very long driveway to the house I can't see. And to me, the more someone becomes irate, the more I think they've got something to hide, really. So you can legally photograph a gate. I feel I'm collecting all of those properties one by one, and collecting at the gates for 2 works now, stones as memory holders. They're witnesses to something that's happened there, what's passed through those gates and who has, and that would include our children, which at first years ago I didn't realise till I saw some being baptised along with the children of the colonists. And that then on a particular day made me understand, because often they don't have a surname. So you're kind of thinking, how is this child turning up in a baptism register? But it becomes more and more evident. It's a huge network, and some of it's very pedophilic. And so that's where colonists of power don't marry or married very late, but yet have a spate of Aboriginal children baptised or known to be staying with them. And some of those then were members of the Port Phillip Association and headed across to Victoria early and undertook the same behaviour with Aboriginal children in Victoria. So I feel partly responsible that this be known not only for our sake in Tasmania, but for what eventuated next in Port Phillip. We need to, I think, make evident those chains of connections between here and where you are. And so this artwork, this process of exhibiting in Victoria is really important to me for various reasons. So quite a few of those children in the posters ended up in Victoria, going across in the 1830s, and also the colonists, which is another could be a spate of posters as well of perpetrators.
Could you just talk a little bit about what brought you to art? Like, how did you start off as an artist and see that as a way to unravel your history and reclaim your cultural heritage?
On reflection, I go back to high school, and I chose to have my work experience in the State Library, and I was in West Australia at that point. So, and I chose to work in the oral history section and transcribe oral histories from cassettes. So that I think it's very interesting, really, when you reflect on where things kind of started. And then my first degree was in archaeology prehistory, also in West Australia, which I dropped at third year level because I wasn't comfortable being and digging, and I wasn't at home in the West, but also I wasn't convinced by how it was so, particularly then, completely disconnected from the present, this idea of archaeology as not connecting to living peoples was very odd. When I first came to art school, it was kind of accidental. I was in West Australia and working in a camping shop. And then I took drawing classes at night at TAFE. And then I went on this epic motorcycle pillion passenger journey, and a huge eagle flew into our heads, both of our heads. So we pulled over and we were okay, and the eagle was okay, but it was actually like bizarrely unlikely that any of us would be okay. But that shocked me into, sort of out of being full-time retail sales assistant into applying to uni. So you just all of it seems almost like a dream. Yeah, as I think I said earlier, it's really, I think, critical for well-being, or for me, to understand where I come from. Yeah, art has been a good way for me to share that, but I'm aware that I think I need to speak more in person to people and convey more than the kind of the way that art communicates isn't necessarily a lot of information, though I try to pack in enough for people to become curious, to maybe go on a similar journey of thinking about things like the spate of colonial homes with the most land grants that still exist across the island.
It's just a real privilege to have you in our gallery, and thank you so much for being on this Artists in Conversation.
Thanks for the opportunities and for speaking. It's fantastic.